It seems like the last couple of weeks, all I want to do is to teach a little Torah, and then somehow the world is discovered in Torah, which is a beautiful thing. So what I want us to focus on with the time that we have, so we're going to be covering a lot of ground here, is to focus on a few of the verses. Specifically, we're going to look at Abraham buys the cave of Machpelah. Why does he do this? Why? Well, as a burial place, right, exactly. So it's a burial place. But what interests me today is that he's very insistent that Abraham is a well-known person at his time, and so he wants this burial place, and he is very clear that can't be gifted to him. So here in Genesis 23, verse 9, the first text on the sheet, and if you don't have a sheet, look on with someone next to you, and I should say any typos in here are my fault, not anyone else's. So the verse says, verse 23, verse 9, let him sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst, right? The bold in these are my emphasis. So why is it important to the Torah that Abraham purchases the land which is located in modern-day Hebron? Why is it important to Abraham and to the Torah that it is purchased? To make a claim to the land. Yeah, someone said to make a claim to the land, right? So a gift, sometimes there might be strings attached. Has anyone received a gift like that before? Right? That there might be, but a purchase is clean and clear. Okay, so as far back as the Torah itself, it is important that Abraham pays the full price by Abraham and by the Torah's telling. Sforno, by the 16th century, gives us another insight in it. He's a 16th century Italian biblical commentator. He says Abraham wanted complete freedom to do what he wanted to in the property once he had acquired it. This is the privilege granted to anyone owning an ancestral heritage. Abraham wanted it understood that as a result of the sale, Ephron would not be able to dictate to him how close to his property Sarah and other members of his family could be buried. Right. So again, what Sforno is saying is that he wanted the claim to be clean and clear, that Sforno is saying that Abraham wanted full title and use of the land. It gets expanded by the 18th century Moroccan commentator, the Or HaChaim. He says, so that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, Abraham made a point of describing the transaction as a gift, though perfectly aware that money would be changing hands, as indicated by the words, for full monetary value. Abraham was astute enough to purchase the cave in such a way that any future complaint was out of the question. There was also the concern that landowners of adjoining property could claim that the land should have been sold to them in preference to an outsider, something known in Jewish law as din hamatzar. Another consideration of Abraham was that after the transfer of the cave, someone might present a lien dated prior to the transaction, which would require him to give up his claim. If there's real estate attorneys, you might see this is familiar. For all these reasons, Abraham used both the expression of gift and sale when we're referring to the way he wanted to acquire the cave. This would protect his claim, also under the heading of what is known in Jewish law as din chalifin, acquisition by means of a symbolic transfer or of a barter. So here, what I'm highlighting in the Or HaChaim, or what the Or HaChaim is highlighting, is that it is possible that in the imagination of the Torah, that there might be future challenges to the claim of the land. Right? So we see in the 16th century and again in the 18th century that there's the possibility that there might be a claim or a challenge to the claim of the land of Abraham. And so Abraham wanted to be very clear and thorough in this. So today, we see such a challenge. Right? Today, we are seeing the challenge, and for the next few minutes, I want to unpack this and to address it head on. Of course, the challenge that I'm talking about is that we see across social media, we see across claims in the media that Israel is the result of colonization, and that the fundamental idea is that Israel itself is not a legitimate claim to exist as a country. It's a serious challenge. And interestingly enough, possibly it's one that's been anticipated as far back as Abraham, that the existence and the validity of the claim would be challenged. So how does the charge of colonization today undermine Israel's legitimacy as a land? Just so that we can understand, we could put it all out there. How does the charge of colonization present itself as a challenge to Israel's right to exist? This is something that we're all encountered with, but maybe hesitant to address. So let me help address it. So the argument that is being made on TikTok and on college campuses and other places is that if Israel is the result of colonization, and we are anti-colonization, that any country that was colonized is illegitimate, and therefore Israel shouldn't exist. That is how the argument is made. It is interesting that no other colonized nation is challenged in that way, let alone the fact that that is not the origins of Israel. But if you want to accept that Israel is the result of colonization and that all countries that were colonized should be illegitimate, why is Israel the only country that is challenged in that way? That's question number one. Question number two is that actually the origins of Israel, of which I state it is not? So let's turn the page and to spend a couple minutes figuring this out a little bit. So what is colonization? Let's just put it out there for us all to be able to understand. So this I pulled from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Seems like a good source to define something. So colonialism is not a modern phenomenon. World history is full of examples of one society gradually expanding by incorporating adjacent territory, settling its people on newly conquered territory. In the 16th century, colonialism changed decisively because of technological developments in navigation that began to connect more remote parts of the world. The modern European colonial project emerged when it became possible to move large numbers of people across the ocean, and here's the key, and to maintain political control in spite of geographical dispersion, right? So think of England, who is sending off English people, and the intent was to spread their language and culture and to pull back resources back to the homeland. Right, so it was like spokes, right? Think of why did they speak Portuguese in Brazil? Because that was colonialism, and so they exported their language, and Brazil speaks Portuguese now. Or France, why do so many African countries speak French? Because of the same reason. This entry uses the term colonialism to describe the process of European settlement, violent disposition of political domination over the rest of the world, including the Americas, Australia, and parts of Africa and Asia. The difficulty of defining colonialism stems from the fact that the term is often used as a synonym for imperialism. Both colonialism and imperialism were forms of conquest that were expected to benefit Europe economically and strategically. Again, like an outpost to send out your culture and to bring back in the resources from the periphery. The term colonialism is frequently used to describe the settlements of North America, Australia, New Zealand, Algeria, and Brazil, places that were controlled by a large population of permanent European residents. The term imperialism often describes cases in which a foreign government administers a territory without significant settlement. Typically, examples include the scramble for Africa in the late 19th century and the American domination of the Philippines and Puerto Rico. And the article goes on and on and on. Okay, so for Israel to be a colonial experiment, we would need to have an outside place that is continuing to dominate from afar, which it is not. Right? Israel is an experience all unto itself. If the methodology of colonialism is that there is an outside country that is sending it and expanding its spokes to extend its language and culture and to pull back the resources, where else in the world do they speak Hebrew? Nowhere else. That's Yiddish. Right? There is no other place that speaks Hebrew that is trying to extend itself into Israel and bringing its culture there. Further, the languages within Israel, the population within Israel, is not coming from a single place, but of course Israelis have come from all over North Africa, the Middle East, as well as all throughout Europe, not a single place in Europe, but from all throughout, so that the entire assumption of colonialism that a single country is extending itself is incorrect. Now, sometimes I also hear, no, but that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm really talking about is Israel is colonizing the West Bank. Oh, well, that's not what you meant, though, the first time, that the West Bank is colonization of Israel over the Palestinians, and that's really what I mean, because the first argument didn't hold water. So therefore, you shift to the second argument, but I assure you that while I am fervently against the settlements, it is also not colonization, right? It is something else, but it is not colonization. Because again, Israel is not trying to get people to speak Hebrew. They are not trying to bring resources from the West Bank into Israel. It is not colonialism. It has other problems all unto itself. But whether your argument that colonization is the kind of argument A, or it is argument B, it is incorrect language and it is an incorrect description of the experience. It is a beautiful slogan to get attention, but it is not accurate as to what is actually happening. So I wanted to bring an original source to understand and to kind of debunk this argument that there is an outside influence into Israel. So Israel was founded in 1948. So let's look at in 1911, well before Israel was established, well before that we would know the experiences of World War II, let alone World War I. So Aaron David Gordon, A.D. Gordon, he was he was born in Ukraine, moves to Palestine, is one of the founders, or within the first couple years of Daganya Aleph, one of the earliest, if not the first kibbutz. It's on the southern shore of the Kinneret. And in this text, what I want us to see is that he is making an argument that we need to break ourselves. Remember, this is 1911. We need to break ourselves from the galut. We need to break ourselves from the experience of being the outer experiences, and we need to create a fresh identity here, independent of those European and external ways. Right? And if we are going to actually reinvigorate ourselves As the Jewish people, we need to rid ourselves of this galut mentality. Again, the argument that there is no outside country that is having influence on Israel. That here, well before the country is established, he is arguing that we need to be independent of those old cultural ways. So let's see what he says. It must be absolutely clear to us that we have two paths to choose from in Palestine. One is the practical way of the worldly wise. The other is the real life of national rebirth, right? We can be very practical and just kind of wait for things to happen, or we're going to do something, the real life of national rebirth. The first means the continuation of galut life, with all of its short-sighted practical wisdom, and with all the attitudes and the whole philosophy of life that goes with galut life. The second is the way to the true and meaningful life we seek in this country. Let each man choose whichever of the two ways he will, but let him know for certain that the choice of one forever excludes the other. Galut is always galut. If you stick with the old ways, even if you are living here in Palestine, you are stuck in the old ways. We need to create something unique and different. Whoever seeks national rebirth and a full life as a Jew must give up the life of the galut. Such is the price to be paid. No thing in this world can be obtained for nothing. That does not mean that whoever wishes to see a future for his people must renounce life in the here and now. Not at all. That person is precisely the one who must seek a full life, but he must seek it in a different way, and he must seek a different kind of life in Palestine, he is saying. Not in the old ways from the outside, but in this renewed national sense. The Jew who is genuinely in search of national rebirth will strive for the kind of life in Palestine that is stamped with the seal of a true Renaissance. Whatever is stamped by that seal, whether it be a life of comfort or even that of a simple laborer, is part of the real life. And one that fails to bear the stamp is sham and emptiness, right? If you stick to the galut ways, you are a sham and not taking this on. Again, I'm bringing this to point out this is not an external colonialism. This is something entirely different of what is happening decades before the founding of Israel. There is only one way that can lead to our Renaissance, the way of manual labor, of mobilizing all of our national energies, of absolute and sacrificial devotion to our ideal and task. Not even by thousands of title deeds can national assets be acquired, for whatever title deeds we do possess to the land of Palestine have so far not given us real title to our country. Truth to tell, we have as yet no national assets because our people have not yet paid the price to them. It is not about ownership, it is about investing yourself in the land. They own plenty of property, but he's talking about a national identity. A people can acquire its land only by its own effort, by realizing the potentialities of its body and soul, by unfolding and revealing its inner self. This is how we can, in time, have good farmers, good laborers, good Jews, and good human beings. On the other hand, if in Palestine we continue the life of the galut, with its petty trading and all that does with it, the coming generations will pursue the same road even more vigorously. This is a way of life which requires a radical change, a complete revolution in our galut notions and attitudes and in our galut view of life. He is saying we are different than wherever we came from all of the places that we came from. What is equally powerful about his statement is that he recognizes it is not about the land, that what first has to happen is that you have to have a sense of identity, of working the land, of owning that sense of nationality, and then you become a nation when circumstances allow it. So as much as we are pushing against the ideas of colonialism, what I also want to lift up is an invitation to Palestinians to own their national identity, of creating the infrastructures required in the West Bank and other places, to create that sense of civic life, of civil society, right? Which then eventually will lead to nationhood. Right? Here we see in the history of Zionism that well before 1948, Zionism was a process of creating a people and an identity and the infrastructure that decades later a state would be overlaid upon. But a state cannot be created without the infrastructure already being there. These are challenges that we're seeing in the news and on campuses and in conversations itself. I hope by spending a few minutes that you have a different insight on what's happening. The arguments are going to persist. And I invite you to come talk with me at Kiddush or to let's have coffee together. Let's understand this together. There is plenty to be upset about. But let's get the language right. Let's get the context right. Let's get the history right. And then we'll have a future together. Shabbat Shalom.